The first steps you will take for your longevity will be very efficient and very cheap. But step number 100 you take for your longevity will not be that effective and will be more expensive. Maybe we can transfer some genes from other animals who lived longer than the animal peers. Well, first of all, genetic engineering of people is already going on. When you're putting your life at risk at your own will, it's a valid reason to die. But aging is not a valid reason to die, that's what I think. Now, do you remember how the naked mole rat actually, what it looks like?
Yes,
It's quite ugly.
it looks like a penis. Welcome, Stanislav. I heard a lot about you.
Thanks for inviting me. What is the first thing you would want to ask based on what you have heard?
I had an idea. So I looked at a video of yours and I found your story fascinating, and I would like to go throughout the episode. I would like to go through your story. However, I want to start with something completely different because you see, I'm in the longevity space for a while, and I don't think I've ever heard a coherent argument for why this really might be the first time, for why we might be the last generation that will have to die or not have to die, right? This question of, hey, did we achieve longevity, escape velocity? But in your presentation, you actually gave a coherent explanation for that. So I would like to ask you, why do you think we might be able to achieve longevity, escape velocity?
Okay, great question. And it's a great question to start with. Longevity, or rather to say maximum lifespan, is of course a genetic trait because we know that mice live for 2 years and people live 90, maybe 80 years, and maybe whales live 200 years. So actually, maximum lifespan is some genetic trait which is transferred in generations, inherited. That means this can be fixed if you have some access to genetic information. You can edit it and somehow rewrite genetic. And we seem to have different technologies, different tech, which is already in place, which is helping us doing that. Well, first of all, genetic engineering of people is already going on. I usually give the example of treating hemophilia, the disease with unclotting blood. But maybe you have heard that a couple of weeks ago, scientists have concluded a treatment for children who were blind since they were born. So it was a genetic therapy for people who were born blind. And they started to see the condition was somehow treated through genetic therapy. So we already have some means to edit the genes. But the other question is, how do we edit them to live longer? Well, there may be two answers to this question. One question is very simple. If you look at the supercentenarians, people who live over 110 years, we will realize that they are mutants. They are X-men and X-women. So they have some genetic traits which prolong their longevity. Let's say many of them have Klotho gene expression based on the Klotho gene mutation, specific mutation which helps you offset neurodegenerative disorders. And we could use that Klotho gene polymorphism as a target for the gene character. That's one simple question. How we could win a little bit, like 10 years of maximum lifespan, maybe. But their main goal, I think, is to create whole new genetics. I mean, to create new genes which maybe have not been invented by nature yet, which can may be useful for longevity. Or on the other hand, maybe we can transfer some genes from other animals who lived longer than the animal peers. Let's say we all know about naked mole rat, who lives like 40 plus years, maybe longer, because they don't seem to age at all. Based on what Google published. Google published great research on naked mole rats, showing that their mortality rates are not rising. So that means they're not essentially aging in the way people age. And maybe you have heard about the work by Vera Gorbunova and Andrei Siluyanov. They are Russian origin scientists, but they work in US. So it will be very easy for you to access their works, and I will share some links maybe for our podcast also. So Vera Gorbunova and her team actually managed to transfer some genes from naked mole rats to mice, which resulted in mice living longer, suffering less from cancer. And the good thing here, do you remember how the naked mole rat actually, what it looks like?
Yes, yes.
It's quite ugly.
It looks like a
So
penis.
yes, you can say that. But actually, the mice, after they were genetically modified, they did not start to look like naked mole rats. So they were very nice. They were very good-looking mice, and that's what you would like maybe also to achieve when you are being genetically edited. You would like to stay same what you look now. So
So mice was genetically modified. How long did they live compared to normal mice?
based on the course, I think they lived like 15% more, 15%.
Mm-hmm.
But the main thing here is they were not just this was not a gene knockout, because we can know a lot of gene knockout mice lines which live longer or shorter or whatever. But this was a gene transfer. A whole gene was transferred from naked mole rat to the mice. I mean, the gene is a gene, any gene, is several thousands nucleotides. They span across your DNA, so they code that information in in your DNA, right? Tricky thing here was not to make a gene knockout or transfer some polymorphisms, but a whole big piece of information. What is important here is that we could borrow some genetics from some animals who live longer, or like, Greenland shark or whatever. Of course, that's not that straightforward.
Yeah, what
Uh,
could go wrong?
yes, what could go wrong, but basically, right? But let's think about something different here. Have you covered in somewhere in your podcasts for fault and the recent advance by
I
Microsoft?
did not.
Yeah, okay, let's mention just a little bit of that here. So in December 2021, it was also a Google origin team, it was DeepMind. They published neural network which was able to predict the structure of proteins. Structure of proteins is super important because structure is what makes and predicts the function of the protein. And any protein is actually a biological machine. So everything which is happening in your body right now is actually more, or like 90% of that is processed by proteins as biological machines. So you could process something to live longer. You could inject some machines into your body to live longer. But to do that, you actually need to inject some genes which will code those proteins and express those genes, of course, so that they are transcribed to become proteins. So what recently, in second half of the last year, 2024, based on that work, Google published all the protein structures for all living beings who were sequenced. So all the sequenced living animals or plants or whatever, the genes were, their proteins were published, the structures were published as a big database. So in order, how to say that? Well, before actually, to explain why this is important, we should mention that 50 years before Google, for 50 years before Google published these works, scientists were trying to discover the structures, and they were only able to discover 200 or so structures, like several hundred structures. But now we have hundreds of thousands of protein structures published in 3 years. So this
What
is
can we do with it?
when you can actually mine this database to find any proteins with any function you want it to fulfill.
So we end up creating pills and
You can, yes, that's on the surface. You can create pills from it, but you can also create gene engineering. So you can actually find some genes in this library, which will, for example, let's suppose that Alzheimer's disease is connected with beta amyloid. This is maybe not so, but let's suppose we want to remove beta amyloid and see what is happening then in the human brain. So we can create a gene based on that library, which will be acting as a monoclonal antibody, for example. But it will be expressed in your brain, so you will not need to inject it, and you will not need it to cross a blood-brain barrier. You will not have these issues no more. Well,
how do you put it inside you?
good question. Have you heard about Zika virus? Zika virus. So this is a virus in South America mostly. It infects, if it infects a pregnant woman, it's very likely that the child will be born with inborn microcephaly. So the brain will be very small, the head will be very small. So different viruses, they have different typicity, I think it will be in this word.
So you inject it anywhere and it goes into your bloodstream and it crosses the blood-brain
Goes to
barrier.
the brain because it has something like a compass to go to your brain. It will not go. It will not go to express in your liver. That's actually right now. For example, we're using mostly adenoviruses for infecting and for gene therapy. Adenoviruses or lentiviruses, I think, are also being used a lot. So adenovirus works differently. It's basically a respiratory virus. So it goes to the lungs or it goes to across your body to infect like 5 or 10% of your cells. So adenoviruses are also good for doing general gene therapy. But if you want some gene therapy to end up in your brain, you want to use some neurotrophic viruses. So that's I'm not saying that it will be like exactly Zika virus, but I'm just giving you an example of what can be done here. But the most fascinating thing, which fascinates me most here, is that of course I think you use a lot ChatGPT or whichever language model you work, right? So to create content,
Yep.
to create text. So DNA is also a text, and you could ask, you can train, and this is actually already been done. It's already been done. There are language models which are trained not on the human texts, but which are trained on the DNA and RNA sequences and protein sequences, like the examples I gave. So we can actually ask a language model, big language model, to create a protein which creates a specific function. So what I'm trying to, like in the end of the day, what I'm trying to say, we're right now holding all the prerequisites to put together a technology which can edit the genes. And I would agree here with Jean Hebert, who is saying that aging is actually not druggable. You cannot treat aging with drugs. You should somehow replace aging or edit aging in your genes. Because editing your genes is something like, like transferring, for example, organs from the pig. It's very difficult to print an organ. For example, to 3D print a heart, you will need to advance our 3D printing technologies a lot. But nature already gives you pigs, and you can grow hearts for people. And this is being done. The hearts are being transplanted to people. Editing your genes is the same workaround. You put something in your genes and you ask nature to actually help you defeat aging with these proteins you send to your genes. And I was just trying to show that this potentially can now be done, and we understand every step of this process. So now, usually when people get to understanding every step, they need several dozens years to create the technology. Like I usually give the example of nuclear bomb. So the theory of nuclear reactions was created in the beginning of 20th century. It was done by a Rutherford physicist and Nobel laureate. And in 1940s, we had the atomic bomb. But before that, before we had the atomic bomb, the US was, of course, the first country to have it. We had the nuclear reactor. The controlled nuclear reaction was created before. What I'm hinting here at is that a weapon of mass destruction was, so to break something, the tool to break everything was created later than the controlled nuclear reaction. So first you get something to control, then you create weapons.
So,
So
so
actually,
you say the proof of concept is already there, and the proof of concept here for aging would be gene editing.
yes. So the Rutherford moment for aging, defeating aging, already happened in 2007. This was the Rutherford moment for anti-aging technology. Like Rutherford moment for nuclear bomb was created by Rutherford in 1911. So we are already past the Rutherford moment in biology of aging. This is also scary.
And also exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is actually, but let's maybe I have an inner feeling. Maybe I want to suggest we look at the other side of this coin. What does it mean for us? Should we, for example, be like Brian Johnson, who I like very much? Should we maybe dig a bunker in our house, put all the medical equipment in our house, and stay all the day, like doing some exercises, trying not to die? Should we? What should we do actually about that? So we're living in this great moment. Let's say we believe that. Well, I think that it's we should not be overdoing this. Like you should live a normal life. Actually, you should be doing everything you can do reasonably to live longer, and you should do also everything you could do reasonably to help that process. So right now, I think we're helping this process because we're talking about that. We're making this idea more well known, right? So we're helping anti-aging research. We're calling people attention to this problem and that this may be done. So that's my main goal, I think. I don't think I'm very successful as a biologist, but I think I've done a lot in telling people the idea of it. So that's also a good contribution. But I don't think we should be scared to die. So I don't think we should be scared of death. So that's not the point I want to make. We should not be trying to live by all means. For example, we should not be trying to live by hurting other people. That's what. So there are many ethical implications here of what we should do. We should do something good for ourselves, but without hurting other people, I think.
Should we be scared of the events leading up to our death?
Again, I don't think I got the question.
Sure. So there are when people are talking about being scared of dying, they are saying at one point being scared of non-existence, and on the other hand, there are events those are leading up to your non-existence. Unless you get a bullet in your head, then it's going to take a couple of seconds, but more realistically, you're going to be suffering for hours, days, weeks, maybe even years.
So you see, it's very natural to be scared of pain and suffer. Actually, through the work with psychologists and psychotherapy, I learned one nice idea I like. there is one idea I like. One of the psychotherapists once told me that you can never get accustomed to pain. So if somebody makes you suffer, there is no way you can get used to this. So there is no way. So now we're not saying that about just somebody making someone suffer. We're saying about some bad event which may happen and which will make you suffer. It's very natural to be afraid of pain. And this is, by the way, a great question also, because when uh, as a biohacker, I would say we should fight for our life. We should always try to live longer. We should hope for the better, that some treatment will be created for whatever disease we may have in the future. So if there is some a relative or some friend, we should support him in his idea to live longer if he has some condition which is threatening his life. But it's up to the person to decide whether he is able to take some more suffering, let's say, if he's suffering. So you cannot be totally egoistic in this. You can be egocentric, I would say. You cannot just use your own judgment to tell other people what they should do about that. So this is quite complicated. We are living in a complicated moment when we don't have all the means to help this, and everyone should decide for himself. But it's very natural. Let's get back to where you actually put the first question. We should avoid any risky behavior. Oh, this is a tricky place, tricky point. You should decide for yourself what is the affordable risk you can afford. So, for example, should you go snowboarding? Should you go diving? Are you diving in the
I
sea?
did
You did? Okay.
once.
Okay. Okay. I also did once. It was like more than 20 years ago. And then I said, never ever again. But it was not before because I wanted to live forever. It was just because it was scary as it is. Enough
Okay.
scary. Even if I do, even if I want to die someday, I don't want to die. But that's my perception of sitting on the bottom of sea and seeing like 20 meters of water ahead of you. I just don't like that feeling. So well, I think that actually dying because you're doing some extreme sports, extremal sports is valid. It is a valid reason to die. So when you're putting your life at risk at your own will, it's a valid reason to die. When parents they risk their life for their kids, for their children, it's a valid. It's better that nobody ever has to do that, but it's a valid reason when the person may want to give his life for something. But aging is not a valid reason to die. That's what I think. So there may be some reasons are good, some reasons are not valid, and aging is not just not a valid reason to die, while extreme sports may be something up to you to decide.
Yeah, I see. So ideally, we have unconditional right over our own bodies, whatever we want to do, right? Hookers and coke. But if something comes along that forces us to do something that we don't want to do, like aging, then that's not a valid reason to
Yes,
die.
yes.
I wanted to go back to a moment because you mentioned gene therapies, and I mentioned that I heard a lot about you. So I heard a lot about you in Prospera, the promised land where Brian Johnson got his gene therapy. And one of my friend there, I spent 3 months there, and I even at one point lived in the same house with Ivan and Anna. I even interviewed them if anyone want to check out Unlimited Bio interview. So their idea is that they are creating a cocktail of gene therapies with which we can improve our human condition. And one of the gene therapy that they are trying to do is clotho. And you mentioned that as well. So now my question to you is that is this the idea gene therapy what they are providing or going to provide that make centenarians live longer, or you think it's some watered down version of it yet?
I think it's very reasonable to expect that's the thing. That's one of the things we need to do. And this is what Ivan does is actually the example of the first wave of gene therapies for longevity. So, like I mentioned, the second wave, the more advanced technology, is to transfer whole genes. But what Ivan is doing is transferring certain adjustments to the gene, which will, or injecting the gene itself in the form of plasmids, let's say, to produce proteins which can be producing the adjusted clotho protein to improve cognition. But it's actually very important. I will share a link with you for this podcast of some research about actually there's going to be a peptide therapy, which is injectable in the form of peptides. It was already tested in the mice and it offsets cognitive deterioration very well. And I should mention here that gene actually fully offsets APOE genes negative effects on Alzheimer's disease prognosis. So people who have APOE4, the most negative allele of APOE gene, but at the same time they have Cloto gene positive mutation. They don't have Alzheimer. And so Clotho is Ozempic for brain. It's so people who could not lose weight without Ozempic, they can now lose weight. And
People
people
who are
who,
genetically predisposed to Alzheimer's are saved by Clotho.
yes, people, but more importantly, it improves cognition. So, like people who couldn't lose weight on Ozempic, they lose weight, and people who couldn't get smarter, they will get smarter on Clotho. So that's Ozempic for the brain. That's very fascinating that we are standing in like 2 to 5 years from the peptide also therapy of Clotho. And this is just another way to do this. Also a valid way to do this, a little bit more conservative, traditional way. Because we know a lot about peptides. We know how peptides work.
Let's take, you know what they say about new drugs. Let's start taking them before the side effects appear.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's talk about you. Half an hour into, finally, let's meet you.
Who's this
So,
guy? Who's this guy?
yeah, who's this guy, and what did he do with the tomato?
Let's find out.
Let's find out. Okay, so let's go one by one on your career. And let's start with the tomato story. All right.
Okay. Yeah, right. Like you could guess from whatever we discussed in the beginning of this podcast, I'm obsessed with longevity therapies. And people sometimes ask me, so right now I'm 42 years old, and people sometimes ask me, why did I choose this field? I was given different answers, like I don't want to age, aging is pointless, or I wanted to be in this field because it's evolving very quickly. But then I remembered one story from my childhood. So when I was like 7 or 8 or maybe 9 years old, so for several years, I've been experiment on a tomato. So I was in Russia. It's very popular to grow tomatoes on your land. So it's like homegrown tomatoes. It's very popular, vegetable in Russia. And unlike what my parents usually did, they picked the crops in the autumn and threw all the tomatoes away. I was carrying my tomato home and bringing it back next summer. So I was doing that for 3 years, trying to extend tomatoes' life. So that's what I was doing, and I was actually thinking for real, for serious. I was thinking that I extended the life of that tomato by 200% because it did not live 1 year, but it lived for 3 or 4 years. And this gives me just the idea that I was fascinated by the idea of longevity ever since. not just for myself, but to find the potential of longevity in nature around me. So to find experiment on something which I could, which I could access. And now to get to the serious part of it, when I became 30, like 32, maybe 10 years ago, I decided, why don't I switch to myself?
Oh, that's a good
And
idea. Why didn't
because
I think about that?
but in between the like 9 years old and 30 years old, I didn't think much actually about that.
Mhm.
So it was like coming back to the basics, coming back to my childhood dream. So, but our body, is something we always have before us. It is always presented for us. We always have access to, more or less, we always have access to our body. So that's why it was very natural for me to start experimenting and measuring my body. And I did not start immediately with experimenting. I started with measuring, collecting different biomarkers of myself. Now I need to mention here that in Russia, blood test is a very cheap service. So, like complete blood count, if you want to do it without insurance, it will be like $500 in maybe in US, but it's thousands times cheaper in Russia. And therefore, recently, Brad Johnson mentioned he has measured 32,000 biomarkers. And I have like 16,000 medical measurements of myself over the 10 years. So I'm measuring 1,300 different parameters, just blood, saliva. This is 1,300 parameters. For the 10 years, I had like 16,000 data points. So I will show a very quick demonstration of this.
What's your pheno age?
My pheno age is around 33. By the way, well, this is what it looks like. So, like when you're doing a lot of blood tests. Oh, I'm sorry, it's in Russian. Let's translate that. Try to translate that.
Are you going with the name BioData online as well? Because that's how Ivan called you.
Yes, yes. This is. I mean, the name of the company is Bio, and this is. Yeah, there it goes. It will.
Well,
It will get.
tell me about BioData before you go into this.
Let me take a pause here. Let me get back to the
Well,
script.
you can keep
Yes.
sharing
Okay.
if you.
Oh, no, I will get back there later.
All right.
So, what did I do before? What did I do in between 7 and 30 years? Well, I was actually doing a finance career, corporate finance career. So I graduated from GIMO University, which is like Harvard in Russia, like one of the best universities. So I had a very bright career in finance ahead of me, and I was doing that until I was 32. So I became a regional CFO of some average company in Russia. And then I started a company which I believed at first would become my family office. So a family office company usually works for your family, and that was a longevity family office for my family. So I was using that company to sign contracts, attract attention, enter into some collaboration with institutes or labs to access medical technology in the way I want to access it. Because I was spending a lot of time studying aging itself or technology we could use to extend our lifespan or at least health span to make us healthier. BioData, the name was already there in 2017 when I started it. BioData was at the center of all this tech, where this tech was contracted and coming together, integrated. And it was not long until this company was recognized in the market, and people just started to approaching me to shell whatever technology I got just for medical examinations, checkups, and that's what we started to do as a service.
Oh, sorry. Can you illustrate a user journey here. Like what did someone do? How did they benefit?
Like I mentioned, I measure 1,300 biomarkers of myself. And we basically provide this service for our company. We set up experiment, biohacking experiment as a service. So when you approach the company, we interview you, we collect your available medical records from your past. We set up a medical examination in some countries, including Russia, where you will measure 1,300 or so blood biomarkers. And then, as a founder of the company, as the guy who is responsible for putting all this data together, I would discuss your strategy, what you would do next with this data. So here there's a bottleneck. Is not really big, but it's very difficult to delegate that task of working with this data and breaking it into small pieces of work for the team, for the medical team. So I was not able to delegate that, let's say, so far. But the good news is that I'm working directly with the client to help him in his journey with the doctors, with the medical teams. And in 3 or 4 months, it will be reasonable to carry out a follow-up examination, which will be smaller, not that expensive, and it will be a proof successful in addressing the original issues which have been uncovered by the first setup examination. And to give you the idea, when you do 1,300 biomarkers in one go, you will definitely discover like 20 or 30 deviations, some imperfect places where your biomarkers actually deviate. But not all of these deviations need to be addressed at this point, because you should address the root cause of any issue and then let the body solve the other deviations. So the idea is not just that. The idea is that we have a very full list of whatever issues you have. But the idea is to go to the root of it and to solve the cause of any potential damage to your health in the future. So this is how it works, and feel free to shoot any questions here.
Okay, so I saw Ivan is using the
That's right.
what does he use? So he's using the software, but did he go through the examinations and stuff with you?
He did not go through the full checkup for now, by now. So maybe he will go through that in the future. So no, he's just using BioData for storing his medical data in our app.
Mhm.
This is the same tool we use for our clients, and basically it's free. So we just sharing our tool. It's more like community thing, not like
Mhm.
a service,
Mhm.
because usually people who onboard in the application, they know me and they have heard something about biodata, so they're interested in started using it, and they can have direct contact with me to learn how to use it.
How many users and how many customers do you have?
The users of the platform are different people from customers.
Yes, that's why I was asking.
Customers, yeah, I mean, customers of biodata are people who want to go through the checkup and they want to use chat.
People who pay.
Yeah, they pay and they want to just ask questions in the chat.
Mhm.
They don't use the app. So there are like in total,
They don't use the app.
yeah.
Ah,
So because it's easier to ask any question in the chat. So it's different CGM, it's different customer journey. So when you come to Biodate, we set up a chart for you. We do the checkup. We give you small steps which you need to follow, like recommendations you need to follow. And there, you of course you don't need to dig into your own data. You just won't, unless you are very interested in that. So just a fraction of BioData customers they actually use the app. But we distribute our app for community, and we have like 300 active users. The registered users are like 5,000. But and I think that what we see as 300 or so users, just different people coming and going. Because when you have blood tests, you don't have them every day, and unlike me, you don't even have them several times a year. You just put some data, then you go back whenever you have some new blood tests, and you
This
put them
is
on the
tracking
system.
blood test. Is this tracking
Yes.
anything else?
Yeah, the idea is actually to put 6 categories of data in the app. Right now, in the version of the app, we've put genetics, blood tests, a food photo recognition through your photo, and we are struggling with sleep, important sleep data. By the end of the year, I hope we will integrate activity and exercises and weight tracking. It's almost ready, so we're finalizing these categories of data. Also, of course, questionnaires. Questionnaires are important because we need to ask you questions. What happened to you in the past? What is your complaints? What was your parents or grandparents' health conditions? So we need to collect all that data to be precise in whatever we tell you. Uh, so the idea is so you could imagine that BioData is a premium service where you could go to do some expensive checkups, have some personal peer-to-peer services. My goal is to automate this and make this cheap service based on the AI chatbot or whatever. But to do that, to actually achieve that goal, I need to anyway put all the data together. So whatever data we collect from our VIP clients, let's say, we need to collect from you. We need to make this data collection very comfortable and not demanding on you, so that you can easily collect your sleep, weight, nutrition, blood test, upload your genetics, and then we get on top of that with our mm, guidelines, and through our guidelines, the chatbot will give you the service. So it's also not chat GPT. That's what I'm hinting at. We want rather to use our existing guidelines to work with the data. So
Uh-huh,
it's some
uh-huh.
know-how of the company. So it's not there. It's not there. You can take photos of your food. You can put your genetics. You can put your blood test in the app right now. It will not give you many feedback. So why Ivan is so happy? Because Ivan knows a lot about his blood tests and he's very interested in the experiments he's running. So Ivan is a biohacker, of course, and he's very much interested in seeing his data in one place. So that's why he's like one of the happy users of our app. But very often we get questions, how do I get recommendations from the app? No, man, you don't. Not now, later. Come back later.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Are you familiar with Mike Last Carton?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I
So,
once was in a conference with him. Yeah.
oh yeah. So what he's doing is that he's calculating all kinds of statistical correlations and all kinds of stuff like that from his diet and his blood test. A lot more than blood test, but blood test is the basis of it. And then he's always adjusting the inputs what he's putting inside his body based on what outcome he got. That's it's interesting.
Absolutely. I was doing the same thing for 10 years. So a lot of blood tests, like 1,300 biomarkers, that are not done for fun. You're doing that to, and also, anyway, that's somewhat expensive, even in Russia. And I wouldn't be doing that if it was not like for practical reasons, to somehow adjust and track your progress, my progress in this case.
Mhm.
So yes, you should only actually measure something which is practical for you. That's a very good rule, not to measure something you don't understand or you can't put to practice.
Well, maybe the AI can understand it and tell us the actionable results.
That's a recent idea, but I'm not over optimistic about this because in BioData, like 3 years ago, we had to deal with different questions when people come and say, "Okay, my doctor told me this. What do you think about this, Stan?" But now they came, "Okay, ChatGPT told me this. What do you think about this?" So, and actually, through this experience, I get that people get unreasonable advice from ChatGPT, and
Mm-hmm.
my experience is different. I use ChatGPT a lot in assessing the data, but what I think is happening is that through reading, through constant work with the data, I grew more professional in putting together the questions and putting the data, quality data into the ChatGPT, and also tracking and avoiding hallucinating. Because if you just take 5 pages of your blood test, if you upload it to ChatGPT, please check. It will hallucinate, it will lose your data, it will disregard some of your data. So when you upload anything in ChatGPT, you should first question you should ask is, please repeat what data you see now. What do you understand from this file? What raw data you have just obtained from me? Because if you ask that question, you will see that it tends to miss some of the data, and therefore this data will not be used in analysis. And this is very tricky. It may lead to different conclusions or incomplete conclusions. So AI, conversational AI, is not yet there to fully go without additional guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure we should really speak about that here because that's not our subject. But we need to use RAG systems to retrieval augmentation generation approach to help AI comprehend all the data. So it's not just ChatGPT. You should build infrastructure to feed data into AI. If you have the right infrastructure, then you will be successful in analyzing the data through conversational AI.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, first of all, it it would be good if people would be programmers and then they would use ChatGPT all the time and they would see exactly where the limitations of this software is, and maybe they can then apply to their everyday life. but uh, but anyway, yeah, you're right, it's not the topic of this conversation. Is there anything recent in your career that you didn't mention yet?
Well, yes, I guess. This year, it became obvious to me that in my previous experiment, I disregarded the mental condition.
Oh, the tomato.
No. Mental condition, I mean,
Just kidding.
specifically working with,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I disregarded the context of the stress, but not just the stress, the residual chronic stress which the people are experiencing, and their emotional state. So let me try to explain why this is important. It may be obvious, it may look obvious, but it's not that obvious actually. So everything which is happening in our body is actually controlled by the brain. So chronic stress, of course, affects how hormones are working, and there is actually even an idea. One of the theories of aging is hormonal endocrine theory of aging. So, and for the past 7 years, when we worked with the data, worked with people, when I worked with myself, we were disregarding that part because we always outsourced that part to psychotherapists. So we're saying somebody is coming and he has some health issues. Let's say we examine and we don't find any organic issue, organic reasons for this person to be experiencing that condition. And we will say, okay, it seems you need to work with a psychotherapy. That's not our case.
Hmm.
So we would just
Knowledge
outsourcing,
blindness on the
yeah,
unmeasurable.
outplacing that, yeah. This because I'm trying to find more connection between how our our brain works and what conditions we may have in our body. Because I feel that we need to be more precise and how it can be treated. Let me give you an example. For example, one of the clients, a tennis player, has an issue with his right arm. And this is very typical for the tennis players. And we suggested like 10 different means how to work with this condition. But after 4 months, the condition was still there. And the medical way to approach that will be surgery. And it's irreversible changes like cutting some ligaments to let the hand work in a different way. And the pain will go, likely, could go away. So, but through studying the mental background of this case, we realized that there is a huge tension in the muscles, and there are changes in the posture. There are changes in how the person like perceives the posture and how the person perceives himself in the space. So, and this is a very tricky question. If we go for surgery, that's what I will do earlier. I would say, okay, conservative treatment is not helping you. Let's go for surgery. We will just proceed to the next step where the pain will come back, and the next ligament will also be ischemic. It will not have enough access of the oxygen because of the stress is there because we have not worked with the mental condition. And so I'm putting more focus here. And I even think maybe in contrast with what I was saying in the beginning of the podcast, maybe we cannot defeat aging at all without fixing how we think. So maybe we cannot justify aging with genetics. Maybe we should also consider some mental practices like meditation and some specific way of biological feedback practices. So what I'm interested in right now is a biological feedback. That's and neurofeedback. So now we got a lot of opportunities to work with this because there are more and more devices in the market which help you to collect fascinating data. I was interested in feedback even 70 years ago, but there were just a couple of devices on the market which helped you collect some data there. And now we got a great access to the brain biomarkers of brain activity. And we even have ready products on the market helping you to use neurofeedback when you meditate, when you're trying to fight pain, or when you're trying to relax, use some stress coping techniques. So I think the next big thing which we need to master is the neurofeedback.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, those are fascinating topics. I've been using just a blood oxygen measurement ring, not the Oura ring, but it graphs. It creates a real time graph of what's going on with my blood oxygen. I was practicing the Wim Hof method with that graph, right? Like I knew that, oh, it went too low. I think I should really stop holding my breath at this point.
Well, that's how it works.
Uh
Wim
huh.
Hof or breath work. That's how it works. It creates actually
Hypoxia.
hypoxia, right? Yeah. That's a tricky question whether you should or should not do that. It's a big question, not for us to discuss here, because Greenland shark. who lives 500 years
Doing the
actually
Wim
lives in,
Hof as well.
yeah, she's living in hypoxia all of her life.
Um,
So, and that's also what is happening with the whales. So actually, sea creatures, ocean creatures,
mhm,
they live most like all different, mm, jellyfishes, all those guys, and they are the longevity champions and they live in hypoxic state all their life. But I'm not saying that Wim practice is good for everyone or good at all
mhm,
for humans. But it's an interesting field of research, and of course, we should rely on biomarkers of inflammation, of cognition. So you should. One of my concerns is that if you go to hypoxic states a lot, your cognition, your brain will deteriorate actually. So it
mhm,
could hurt your brain. That's the main concern for me. And what is the right dosage of hypoxia for you? I don't do Wim Hof. I do hyperbaric oxygenation. And even though it's called hyperbaric oxygenation, it also produces hypoxia training for you because when you go into a hyperbaric chamber,
yes.
you get saturated oxygen. But when you go out of the hyperbaric chamber to
Oh.
the regular, your body starts to think you are hypoxic and it starts turning on hypoxia control mechanisms. That's how hyperbaric oxygenation is good for your health
Mhm,
because it
mhm.
helps you create hormesis. So I'm just saying here that I use hypoxia in my biohacking protocols. And I think it's basically a good thing because for example, with hyperbaric chamber, I was able to enhance my maximum oxygen consumption by 15% or so.
Mhm, mhm,
To assess that, first of all, you should do some sports. Like you should do some sports. You should not lie on the sofa. If you're lying on the sofa, oh no, biohacking will help you actually if you are not doing anything with your lifestyle. You should eat well, you should sleep well, you should exercise enough, and then you go for these fancy supplements, hyperbaric oxygenation, and whatever training and gene editing, whatever. Nothing is working if you are just lying on the sofa and doing biohacking on the sofa.
mhm. All right.
Bad news for everyone. Bad news for everyone.
Well, wouldn't that contradict to what you said in the beginning that you don't think we should be living in the way of Brian Johnson is living, you know? What's
Uh,
the right balance you're striving here?
let's go for Pareto distribution, 80 to
Ah.
20. So, like, I would remind that in exercises, for example, the mortality curve flats out after you do like 180 minutes of intensive exercise. So
Mhm.
there's no need to like exercise every day, for example. You should do breaks in your exercises. So, and put it this way, the first steps you will take for your longevity will be very efficient and very cheap. But step number 100 you take for your longevity will not be that effective and will
Mhm.
be more expensive.
Diminishing
So,
returns.
yes, diminishing return. So, if you're already doing lifestyle, that's super cool. Let's find a dozen of supplements you could take. Let's go for hyperbaric chamber maybe once a week. Let's balance work and life a little bit and find also some space for friends because when we look at super centenarians, people we mentioned in the beginning, who live more than 110 years. These people from different countries, different races like Asians, Europeans, they eat different diets like Asian diet, European diet. They live in different regions. Some of them live like in the south, some of them live in some different climate. Climate is different. But they have only one thing in common. They have some purpose why they get up in the morning. So they have big families. They are loved by their family members and close ones. Or maybe they are doing some community work, some community commitments. For example, in Japan, in Okinawa, they gather together to take care about cleanliness in the streets or whatever, decorating the streets with something. And that's what they do when they retire, when they live these long years after the retirement. And Japan is, I think, the world record country for centenarians proportion compared to the number of people living in the country. So there is only one thing in common. And I will also mention that there are no billionaires. So it's not about the money. Although money is a great hair protector, rich people on average live like 10 years more than poor people. That's correct. But anyway, super centenarians, what they teach us two things: genetics and purposeful living.
I wanted to ask you, what do you think about the concept of longevity as a sport?
Mhm. Well, I absolutely support the concept. Well, I have not enrolled in Rejuvenation Olympics because for me it's technically difficult to take all the tests and send them back to RA.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm gonna participate in the Chinese version of there is a
Chinese.
there's a Chinese version. It's based on this more or less the same concepts.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
testing and then so I'm more in touch with Chinese community
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
of biohackers and longevity enthusiasts. And anyway, well, there are two sides to this. Is biological age the best biomarker? Is it actually the most informative biomarker? No. You could be actually dying, but your biological age could be actually quite good. And I have an example of that in my experiment. So let me mention because it's important and it's not a private question. I'm not private. I'm not being private about my health. So I was living in India for about like half a year, and I contracted a tropical disease there. But it was not obvious because it was like proceeding in a latent manner. And a month before it got into the critical phase and could kill me, I was doing a quite comprehensible checkup. Part of that checkup was also a pheno age indicator, which you mentioned in the beginning. And my pheno age was still 32 years, like 10 years younger. But a month later, I ended up in the hospital, and it was obvious that my condition was critical. And the biological age did not predict that. But I knew that something was wrong because I was doing a comprehensive checkup. And I had a lot of markers from my gut health, which showed me that I have colitis, I have blood in the feces. So I was looking for the reason, and the reason got on top of me, it got ahead of me. So biological age, you should always remember, is not a panacea, is not a guarantee that you are going in a totally in the right direction. But anyway, if you're doing a few measurements, like with different methods, for example, if you're using the more methods you use to measure biological age, and I use 5 or 6 methods to measure biological age in my experiment. And then some of the methods actually grasped that problem in advance. Biological age, however, is not giving you the answer. What is the problem? None of the biological clocks I use actually pointed to the gut. It was only the precise biomarker, comprehensive biomarker panel, which pointed that the problem is in the gut. So this is the hard science of it. Maybe boring, but it's important to remember. that just competing, just being on the top of the rejuvenation Olympics does not mean that you will not die the next month. But anyway, biological age is an important indicator. It lifts some of the questions, and it's very important to measure it in the dynamics also to see how you compete versus yourself. That's also important. So I know that you are on a version of rejuvenation Olympics. So tell me where we're getting at here.
Sure, I'm running the Longevity World Cup, and it's using pheno age for this year. But every year I'm changing the biological aging clock. In fact, actually, Michael Asgarden believes that Grim age is the one that is most correlating with all-cause mortality. No, all-cause mortality age, some kind of biomarker like that would be more reasonable. But I wanted to mention that PhenoAge is using 9 biomarkers, right? And PhenoAge was developed by Morgan Levine et al. And they also developed later on another biological aging clock called Systems Age. True Diagnostic is selling it on the name of Symphony Age. And that, as I was looking at it, that wasn't using 9, it was using something like 100 different biomarkers. But of course, that's not from blood anymore, that's only from epigenetics. So I assume as technology is progressing, we get better and better biological aging clocks. They are looking at more and more biomarkers. We are able to mine more and more data out of our little blood that we are giving to them. Then we should be getting to better and better numbers. And eventually, because this is the bottleneck of the research on aging, that, hey, how do you know that you actually succeeded on reversing someone's age? Like, you really have no idea. But if we get better and better biological aging clocks, then we will have the metric to go there. At least that's my vision.
Absolutely. We need to promote the idea. The more we use different biological clocks and compare uh, same people across different biological clocks methods, the more precise this technology will get. And I'm not totally pessimistic about this. And I'm, like I said, some methods of deep molecular biological clocks usually tend to grasp serious inflammatory conditions, and they help make help early diagnosis. So this makes great sense to compete across different biological clocks and tell people, give people more information about what is the difference and find ways to enroll.
Eventually, as we are getting more and more serious and starting to make monies, I see the biological aging clocks as some kind of a qualifier. Anyone can submit in the biological aging clocks, but only the top 100 progresses towards to the next phase of the competition, where more tests are to be done by them, and then we're gonna get much better results. And then the top 10 is flown to Russia to a small house with a lot of cameras and getting tested to all kinds of things. So that's how I see a competition to be evolving in the long term. But I think it's exciting, starting a completely new sport from zero, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's a great initiative. So I'm totally supporting.
All right. What's one thing that you strongly believe to be the case, but very few people agree with you on?
Uh, 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 Really, it's you took me by surprise. So you see, I'm trying to think of something really interesting which you have never heard in your podcast, because this is really an important question. Okay, um, let me say you this. I'm a strong believer in exponential growth of technology, and in the December 2022, there was no ChatGPT on the market, and we were doing many things in the traditional way. Let's say in the spring 2023, ChatGPT was released, and the world changed totally. It's like having horses on the streets on the beginning of the 20th century, and then having only cars in the streets in 1930. But this happened like overnight because the adoption of ChatGPT like grew billions of people in the first months of 2 weeks. We usually, I mean, a lot of people still think about aging as something unbeatable, something which cannot be defeated, and something which will take a lot of time from now to solve. And we started with this question because you are in the longevity podcasts, but you have not been getting any arguments actually that this is happening in our lifetime, right? You were also doubting this concept. So if you, a longevity podcaster, is being contrarian on this, so then I will guess this is the most difficult question, which I want to, the most difficult, complicated idea I want to put into the people's minds. We're living in the world where tech is evolving exponentially, and we should not underestimate the exponential velocity of this development.
That's what I said. So, what's your value in the marketplace, in the global marketplace? Why should people give you money? Is there anything you would like to point people towards?
Well, we're just fundraising to complete the development of our product. So, what is valuable about our approach, I think, is we're one of the few, or maybe the only startup trying to put six categories of data together. Like I mentioned, genetics, blood tests, or questionnaires data, and we have some approach to work with that data. Value will be totally automating the decision taking proper process, because you cannot take decisions on health, for example, if you don't have a question, or if you don't have genetics, if you don't have blood tests. So the current approach is to have different tabs for different data. So the data is not converging in our apps. It's been stored in fractional apps. And my vision is to unite uh, all the data in one place. If you are really asking me what I will do, why should anyone give me money? So that's where I would spend. I will spend in making UI of collecting the data seamless forever. Uh, cheap and engaging forever. That's my goal.
Stanislav, BioData, thank you very much for coming to the podcast.
Yes, thank you very much.